And I want to formally welcome you all to our next webinar, Untangling the Power of Task Interdependencies, Increasing Productivity Across Teams. This is one of my favorite topics, and I'm glad we had such a good turnout for this. Uh, we were all concerned for two reasons for this particular one. Task interdependencies is not really a sexy topic, so we weren't quite sure how many people would be excited about viewing it. And the second one is, of course, running it now. We had to start advertising towards the end of August, and everybody's still on vacation and kind of, getting kids to school and thinking about Labor Day coming up. And so I'm delighted that we got the turnout that we did. So glad you're all here. One of the reasons this is one of my favorite topics is this is one of the key reasons projects fail. This is one of the topics that is sorely misunderstood by not only a lot of seasoned project managers, but even academia. And so I hope you find this information both enlightening and useful. We will give you tools to help address this issue and hopefully provide you some wisdom on why this is so challenging. And just to make sure, before we get too far along, hopefully you have a headset and you are in a wired connection. For those of you who just are joining us, on your screen on the upper right, you will find a small box with 4 icons in it. One of them is an arrow. That's the one on top. And if you select that, that's your control panel. And one of the things you can do is you will find a chat and question box in there. You can actually drag those out so you can keep them open all the time. And the other item of note is on the bottom, that one that looks kind of like a little hand. If you have something you want to comment on, please feel free to click on that. And I will ask you every once in a while if you have any questions, or if you have something you want to comment on, that's the little icon you want to click on. And I will do my best. I have, got to be easily 7 or 8 different windows open here. I'll try to do my best to keep them all in my mind as I try to go through all this. We are recording this, so please do make sure that we want to keep last names, company names, and any company secrets off the audio. The chat boxes are not on the recording, so you can consider those safe areas, and I will, of course, do the best I can on making sure that I don't give out any corporate secrets, last names, or company names. First of all, can everybody hear me? Anybody have any? I shouldn't say anybody having any problems if you can't. Yeah, give me a raised hand if you can hear me well. Ah, good. All right. Yeah, that's what I like to see. Yeah, for those of you who are in the last one, you know I had a little technical difficulty with that. So good. All right. Very good. Glad to see it. All right, let's go ahead and move on. Just quick note, try to avoid distractions. I know a lot of you are doing this because you want PDUs as well as to learn new things about project management. And it's interesting technology. We don't know if you're not paying attention. So you do need to really pay attention and participate in the webinar if you need the PDUs. Please feel free to participate. There are no wrong answers. A lot of you know that one of my favorite tricks, if you've ever seen me in a training class, you know that one of my favorite tricks in running projects is asking stupid questions, because there really aren't any. And those are the ones that clear up all those little foggy things in your head. So please feel free to participate, ask questions. I will do my best to keep up with them. And as we're going through the material, try to apply the material to both current and past situations. I have found that is one of the best ways to learn how to apply the material in future situations. So as we're going through, try to see how some of the ideas or tools or concepts that we've talked about can help you or could have helped you in previous projects and can help you in current projects. So I think we're all ready to go. Most of you know me. A lot of you have seen me in seminars or otherwise. That is, you can see my hair is getting a little grayer. I tease people in classes. I tell them I'm really only 26 years old, and I had nice dark brown hair only 3 years prior, and project management is what caused me to go so gray. But no, I've actually been doing this quite a while. I've been in project management since the 1976. I think I graduated college and just started in projects, just really literally getting out of school. So I've been doing this quite a while. Some of the interesting projects I've worked on, the Hubble Space Telescope. No, the mirror was not my fault, although I got a lot of phone calls that night. Our software was one of the elements that polished the mirror on Hubble Space Telescope. I've helped build pieces of the U.S. weather radar system, those nice pretty color weather radar pictures you get on your phone. I was part of that system, as well as several air traffic control systems, both in the U.S., over in Taiwan, and the U.K. as well. And you can read the rest of them. I don't want to belabor this. I'd like to get on with today's material. So our topics for today, and of course that didn't work. So let us go to that one. Our topics today is, the first one is, why are projects so challenging? And this is, as I indicated, one of my favorite topics when speaking. Task interdependency is sorely misunderstood, both in the project management world as well as in the academic world. I was looking forward to studying a subject called task complexity in academia when I was getting my MBA. And I was hoping to find a model that would help people understand the real true complexities of intertask dependencies. And the best models presented in the MBA classes really don't understand it. They really can't figure it out. And I found that a lot of senior managers simply don't get it for that reason. A lot of project managers don't get it. It's really not pushed hard. The tools are all out there. It's just really not addressed well. So we will talk about that. We'll talk about the actual mechanics. Once we understand the problems and the issues, we will then talk about the idea of the work package. Now, this topic has been around for a very, very long time. And again, it is addressed properly, but again, not pushed well. And so a lot of people don't really understand it to the depth that they need to in order to help solve the problem of task interdependency. But it's one of the best tools I've found in working with all this. Addressing work packages brings us to another problem of how do we create them. And many years ago, several colleagues of mine and I created a thing called the goals breakdown structure. And like all good breakdown structures, if you have a PMP or if you have studied a lot of this, you understand the basic concepts of breakdown structures. Work breakdown structures, resource breakdown structures, PMI even has a thing called a risk breakdown structure. All these different breakdown structures have several characteristics, and goals actually follow those characteristics. They are a hierarchical decomposition of the goals, objectives, or requirements of projects. And these are what give us the ability to create sound work packages, thereby allowing us to address the problem of intertask dependencies. Once we understand the mechanics, once we understand a lot of the tools that we're going to be addressing, then we can start putting it all together. And at that point, we will start addressing the issue of quality, which is our key success parameter number 6, for those of you following the KSPs that we profess, and collaborative spirit, KSP number 4 as well. We will then wrap it up and allow hopefully about 10, 15 minutes, 12 minutes, somewhere in there of questions and answers. Any questions thus far? And let me clear off the raised hands here. There we go. And any questions thus far before we proceed? Everybody good? All right. Before we get started, I have a question for you all. Now, this is a bit tricky. So, like to ask the question, how many changes in your projects are internally generated versus externally generated? And let me describe this. If I can get my screen to change here. Internal changes. Internal changes are changes that are under the control of the project manager and project team. What do they consist of? You get an activity and you're missing information. You get an activity, but it's late. You were planning to start it on Tuesday, but the people who were giving you the inputs for this thing don't deliver it to Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, or even next week. The inputs they give you don't match exactly what you expected. You expected certain forms to be filled out properly. You found out they weren't. You were given design specs, and the design specs are inconsistent or they are incomplete. So your inputs aren't matching your expectations. Incomplete deliveries. They were going to give you a module, they were going to give you the documentation on the module, but the module doesn't have any documentation, or the documentation doesn't even match the module they gave you. Design changes is another internal change that can occur in projects. Ill-defined task definitions. This actually goes to our key success parameter number 1, but also you will find it in interdependencies. So that, you're given an activity, but you really don't understand exactly what it involves, what it entails, exactly what you're supposed to deliver. And vendor-initiated changes occur in here. Perhaps you've given a vendor a task which you thought was well-defined. They come back to you much later saying, yeah, we don't really understand what we're getting. Those are all the internal changes. External changes are truly outside of the project manager's understanding or control. These are things, especially client-driven changes, especially if the client is external to your organization. And senior management, something changes within the marketplace or something changes within the strategic plan, and you have senior management changes. So with that in mind, I'd like to ask, what percentage of project changes are internal? Missing information, late internal deliveries, inputs not matching, incomplete deliverables, design changes. A lot of people voting here. Yeah, these are the kind of numbers I'm kind of used to seeing. Looks like we have most people. Voting, give you a few more seconds. I got a few more people still voting. Yeah, these are the kind of wow, we got a lot in the 80 to 100. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close that. And interesting. So here's the results. And these are not surprising. These are typical numbers I've seen. For few of you, only 5%. 5% of you, 0 to 20% of your changes are internal. Another 5%, 20 to 40% of your changes are internal. For the rest of you, you're running around about the middle of 60%, 40 to 60, 60 to 80, and 80 to 100. And what that's telling us is that it's project management that is killing us, not our senior managers or our external clients. And as I indicated, one of the challenges that cause this is the inability for us to understand how tasks interrelate and how they work with each other. The other part of that, as I mentioned earlier, is the idea of well-defined deliverables, well-defined work packages. And that is the reason we are now addressing this particular issue. So let us, there we go. I'm showing the wrong screen. There we go. So many little details to worry about. Too many, yeah. Yeah, too many. Yeah, I started running this exercise when I was in Europe, working with a chip manufacturer, and they literally have dozens of teams working on things, and I got the same kind of results. It is absolutely amazing how many people or how many project changes are really internal and really under the control of the project manager and project team. So let's take a look at the mechanics and see exactly how this works out. This is what a project looks like to a skilled project manager. For those of you who have been around a while, you know what this is called a precedence diagram. It is one of the primary diagrams we create in project management. Each one of those boxes shows an activity or work package, and the arrows between them show the dependencies. So somebody at the beginning of the project yells start, and tasks A, B, and C, or work packages A, B, and C can be started immediately, and they can run in parallel. And once A is finished, D and E can proceed. They need the outputs of A. And for B, once B is finished, E, I, and F can proceed. They need the outputs of B. And let's just take a look at the mechanics of this. So let's presume, for the sake of argument, that A is, well, you know, I'm being presumptuous here. Let me not be presumptuous. By show of hands, you can use the raised hand icon for this. Who out there is perfect? If you're perfect, go ahead and raise your hand. Oh, we got a couple good ones. Okay, good. Kurt, Kevin, good. No one else? It's okay, Kurt. You're allowed. I know what you've been through, man. Yeah. Sadly, if you're a Homo sapien, you tend not to be perfect. But let's presume, just for the sake of argument, that task A is being led by an absolutely perfect team. They know exactly what they're building. They build it perfectly. They do it on time. Task C, or work package C, is also being done by a perfect team. They do it on time. They do exactly what they're supposed to do. But B, you know, they're Homo sapiens. They have problems. They run into difficulties. They're a little late. And because they're a little late, their senior managers, you know, start pushing them. You got to get this thing out. You got to get this thing delivered. The project manager's doing the same thing. And so they push it out as best they can, but it's not quite exactly what it was supposed to be. What now happens in E, I, and F? Go ahead. You can give me an answer in the chat box or question box. What happens in E, I, and F? Yeah, you got it. Delay start, quality issues, not quite what they wanted. They now have to start to recover. Now, You all project managers, you know what's supposed to happen here. The first thing we should do is go fix B. But the team who's been doing B has now been, assigned somewhere else. They're off going and doing something else. And once it reaches EINF, we now have to work with all four of those teams, both are all four B, E, F, and I, to try to resolve the issue. Now, what happens if it's not caught in EINF? What happens if it isn't caught until Q? What activities or what teams have to be involved in order to try to resolve this issue? Go ahead and give me an answer in the chat box. Yeah, Kevin's got it. Yeah, and this is the interesting thing. Problems propagate exponentially. And believe it or not, academia doesn't get this. In all of the task interdependency and task complexity models that existed in my MBA classes, none of them understood the idea that problems created early on expand exponentially within projects. Once this problem hits Q, if it's not resolved by Q, you now have to involve almost the whole project team in order to resolve this. It becomes a major catastrophe. And that is the problem with task interdependencies. So you're sitting there and you're the owner of Task I. And obviously you want to do a good job. You want to do what's right. In order to do that, you have to know exactly what you're building. You have to know exactly what your inputs are. You have to know what E is creating. You have to know what B is creating. You have to know when they're creating it. And you need to know exactly what you need to create yourself. This precedence diagram is one of my favorite tools. I don't know how you can run a project without this. It is, I find it fascinating that most project managers are hung up on Gantt charts. They really love Gantt charts, and I do. I love Gantt charts as well. They are a wonderful communication tool. They're a wonderful scheduling tool. But when it comes to really running a project, the precedence diagram is what tells me what needs to be done, what has to be finished, and the order in which they have to be finished and how this propagates. So let me ask you another question. And go ahead and be honest with this. In your projects, do you create, publish, and display the precedence diagram for your projects? And a simple yes or no on this one. Ooh, some good numbers. We have some good project managers out there. I think we have most of the votes in. We're still waiting for a few. Go ahead. It's all right to be honest. This one doesn't show up on any of the recordings. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close and publish. We still have a few people not voting. It's all right. No big deal. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And here are the current results. And yeah, most project managers just simply don't. And it's not that we don't know how to create it. We know how important it is. But I have found one of the best tricks in managing a project is creating and publishing the precedence diagram. When I was working on NextRad was the current U.S. weather radar system. We were revamping all of the weather radar within the U.S. And I was a subcontractor under Sperry. I was under the software development project. and they bought a $70,000 pen plotter. And you got to remember, this is the mid 1980s. Uh, and this thing had a 4-foot wide roll of paper attached to it. And its only purpose in life was to print the precedence diagram for the software development. Now, that was a 9-year project, so you can imagine this was quite a big thing. I would guess it was 4 foot wide or high, I would suppose, by the time you put it on a wall, by about 40 to 50 feet long. And that was one of the more successful projects I had worked on, especially of that size. So now that we understand the issues and understand the complexities, let us go ahead and look at how we can address this. Fortunately, history has given us some interesting tools. Believe it or not, the United States government figured out this problem back in the early 1960s with a thing called cost schedule control system criteria, and you have to have gray hair to remember that one. CSCSC was hated by everyone, and what was happening was the government back then focused mostly on fixed price contracts. And like all good fixed price contracts, as the vendor proceeded through the project, they wanted to get progress payments. So they would set up milestones and they would want payments when they received milestones. Well, they set all those up and they would claim to the government that they reached their milestone. They really hadn't. There were a lot of things they hadn't finished, but they wanted their money. So they claimed they made the milestone. They made it look good. They really hadn't made it, but the government paid them and then they moved on to the next milestone. Well, the same thing would happen then. You know, and then you go on to the next milestone and they hadn't finished that one. They go on to the next milestone, they hadn't finished that one. Well, if you continue through the project through all of this, what you end up at the end of the project is no time, no money, and a lot of work that's never been done that was supposed to be done. Well, the government got tired of this, so they created this concept called a work package, which was part of cost schedule control system criteria. And a work package, badly named, is not work at all. It is actually a component of a deliverable. It is a thing. It is a noun. It's a thing I can test, I can validate, I can make sure it meets all of its specs. And then, once I know it meets all of its specs, the government would gladly pay me for reaching that particular work package or milestone. And this was back literally in the 1960s. Everybody hated CSCSC. It was unpolitely called the 37 criteria. The rules for getting paid were so convoluted that you literally had to hire a consulting firm to figure out the numbers. Fortunately, in the year 2017, it's called earned value and it's cleaned up a lot. But honestly, earned value is nothing more than a simplified, more applicable version of the old cost schedule control system criteria. So we're going to look at what a work package is and how it works and what makes it work. For those of you who have PMPs, you've seen this, and should be just a kind of a reminder for you. We are then going to delve into what I've finally given up on calling it a deliverables-oriented work breakdown structure. I'm just calling it a deliverables breakdown structure because honestly, that's what it is. But for those of you with PMPs, you're familiar with the deliverables-oriented breakdown structure, work breakdown structure. So we will show you how that all fits together. And we will then look at how to create these work packages using our goals breakdown structure. So what is a work package? As I indicated, if you have a PMP and you've taken the test, you know what these things are. And I don't think PMI puts enough emphasis on this concept. Work packages, and I am reading the questions, Igor. We will definitely address those. Um, Work packages really isn't stressed well enough, in my opinion, in PMI. A work package is not work at all. It is a component, a deliverable. It is a noun. It is a tangible thing. And it has well-defined quality specifications or requirements. In other words, when I finish this thing, I can hand it off to my QA department and they can test it and they can say, yes, it passes or no, it does not pass. Now, the next couple of items are less important than the first one, at least for our purposes today. Two of the other criteria for work packages is they have to have an accurate cost and schedule estimate. And if you're familiar with the way PMI and others claim estimates, accurate estimates, plus or minus 7%, maybe plus or minus 5%, with both cost and schedule on accuracy. And the least important for our discussions today, the last criteria for a work package is it is assignable to only one organizational unit. And your definition of organizational unit can be almost anything you want. For some of my projects, that meant a single Homo sapien. For other projects, it was a department or a division or a team. But again, that's not as important for us. The way I like to think about work packages is a piece of the project that you can outsource for a fixed price. And for anybody who's worked on fixed price contracts, you know that you have to have well-defined deliverables. You have to have good quality cost and schedule estimates. When you deliver, that's your deliverable is going to be tested against its requirements or specifications. And if you pass, you get paid. And if you don't pass, you have to go figure it out and fix it before you can get paid. And that is probably the easiest way I can come up with to describe what a work package is. Diana, what happens if in a company you must work across divisions? Um, Technically, Diana, you need different work packages across those divisions. And the reason for that is as much assignable accountability as it is accounting. But as I indicated, in practical terms, do with this as you will. In formal government contracts, when they're working with earned value, those would literally have to be split into multiple work packages. However, from a pragmatic perspective, if it works for you, go ahead. The one concern I have on splitting it is I still want one person, not just a division, one person who is accountable and responsible for that work package. Makes sense, but I'm getting lots of comments here. Makes sense, but if a business work package is subpar, you can really understand the success metrics. Yeah, and like I said, if when the work package is done, literally we hand it to some QA department, some department that's independent of the project to test and verify it. And if it doesn't pass, you kick it back and they have to fix it. That's the way it works. This is very black and white, and that's exactly the way I run it. Therefore, I need one person that has to be accountable for that work package. If they want to divide it across multiple divisions, that's perfectly fine, but those are the criteria I want. Again, in formal government contracts, those would have to be split. Yeah, no problem. Okay, good. Glad it. All right. Yeah. Everybody okay on work packages? Yeah, work packages are not features, Igor. It's a component. It's a tangible thing. So if I'm writing a book, it's a chapter. If I'm building course material, it might be the slide deck. If I'm building a chip, it might be the transmit module. Yeah, it's an actual thing. It's not a feature. Features are characteristics of those. They're more like requirements. Okay. Let me clear those off. Now this is interesting. I have no idea what's happened to this slide. So let me see if I can reload it quickly. What I'm going to do is pull up an earlier one. I have no idea why that slide got destroyed. I do apologize. Bear with me a few seconds. I know where I keep it. I just have to get my computer to work faster. Well, that's interesting. Seems to have been destroyed in multiple places. All right, well, if I don't find it on my next try, I will just have to work through it. Bear with me just 1 or 2 more seconds. Yeah, for reasons beyond my comprehension, this thing has gotten destroyed. I have had very strange technical issues this morning, and this is one of them. So I'm going to have to kind of wing this one. At the top, you see a box, and that box should be the name of the project. For those of you with PMPs, you're familiar with a deliverables-oriented work breakdown structure. Well, I always hated the term work breakdown structure when we're going deliverables oriented because they're not work, they're deliverables. Lots of questions coming up. I will handle those in just a few seconds after I recover from my demise here on my slide. So at the top of the project, work deliverables breakdown structure, we have the project. And for those of you, again, who like to do phases, the boxes underneath would be phases. And in a deliverables-oriented work breakdown structure, the boxes underneath the phases, which would be the third tier of boxes down, aren't work. They are the actual deliverables. They are the things the project team creates. And again, I wish I had my diagram, which would be a lot more illustrative. But let's just pick the first box as, since our first phase in almost every project is either a feasibility or requirements, let's go with feasibility. So let's assume that the first phase is feasibility. The first box on the third tier down on the left might be a business case. That's our deliverable, it's creating a business case. And underneath, you'd see the little tick marks. Those tick marks would be components of the business case. So I might have an ROI section. I might have a marketing section. I might have a risk management section. Those would each be work packages. And whoever's creating those can create it independently. They can have that particular section of the business case validated, checked, peer reviewed, and they can submit it. And after everybody has worked on their piece of the business case, then we can put it all together and have the deliverable, the business case. Let's assume that the second box from the left on the second tier down is the design. Maybe we want to do a design here. And I only have one box underneath it, so that might be the design document. Again, remember it's a noun, it's a thing. And then the tick marks under each of under the design document would be the various components of the design. There might be an input module design, a processing module design, a database module design, and so forth. These are all independent. Work packages that can be created by different teams and then put together to create a design document. Yeah, top level is the project name, next level phase name. Yes, you got it. Third level, deliverables, Kevin. Fourth level, work package. Exactly correct. That's the classic. That's the classic model. And let me get caught up on my questions here. Is there software going to be used to manage WPs? Zishan, actually, you can use any hierarchical creating software. It is more of a concept than it is a challenge to build. So you can use Microsoft Project and use the work breakdown structure in Microsoft Project. But instead of giving them verbs, instead of having them defined as work, you define them as deliverables. So your WBS is literally a DBS, a deliverables breakdown structure, just by making sure they're deliverables and work packages rather than work. Did that make sense, Ishan? Good, good, excellent. Yeah. In fact, towards the end of this, and I'm running out of time, so I got to go really fast. Uh, I'll give you a nice software tool that I happen to do to use for this. My handout has a slide. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, if you download the one handout, the slides there. I was wondering if it was there. Thank you, Michael, for letting me know. Excellent. So somewhere between when I downloaded that, and I literally downloaded that 45 minutes before the webinar started, so I have no idea what happened to this slide. So good. Everybody okay? All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on. Once I understand work packages, one of the keys is making sure that when I create them, they are exactly what is needed, not just for the customer's deliverables, but also for the succeeding activities. And one of the tools is yet another breakdown structure, which I and several colleagues created some very large number of years ago, called the GBS. The United States government figured this out, and a very smart person by the name of Joseph Juran also figured this out. Juran, you may know, for those of you who have studied quality and those of you who have taken the PMP exam, Juran is one of the gurus of quality from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and he figured this out as well. Both the government and Juran figured out that goals are actually hierarchical. Just like a work breakdown structure, just like a deliverables breakdown structure, goals follow the same path. So that you start out with a high level objective, you can decompose those down to smaller objectives and decompose those down to smaller objectives. And got together with a couple colleagues and we created this thing called the GBS. It follows all the rules of breakdown structures. So we start off with the project mission statement, and that is created by the project manager and sponsor and in conjunction with the client. That is the primary goal of the project. The next tier down are business objectives. These are usually defined by the business analyst, and the way I like to do it, I want to see direct ties of the business objectives to the strategic plan. If I don't see direct ties of the business objectives to the strategic plan, I wonder why we're doing the project in the first place. These are generally done by business analysts to satisfy the business plan of the organization. Once we have the business objectives, we can then create the project or product requirements. And these are the characteristics, features, functions, and of the deliverables. And for those of you who've been running projects a while, you know what requirements are, you know exactly how they work. But understand that they also must tie up and support the business objectives. And this is one of the key things missing in most projects, is the direct link of the requirements, the deliverables of the projects, to the business objectives of the organization. This is one of the ways I manage scope creep. We only need to meet enough requirements to meet the business objectives, no more, no less. Product requirements are created by the customer. They are the ones who own that and who are responsible for that. And then once we have the requirements document, once we have the SOs signed off by the customer, I can then give it to my technical designers and my architects, and they will take those deliverables, decompose them down into their components. And this is by design. This is what designs do. And then each of those components will have its own specifications or requirements. So in theory, I ought to be able to take any specification or any requirement of a work package, see how it directly links to a product or project requirement, and then see how those link directly to my business objectives. And that's the idea with the goals breakdown structure. If you've done government contracts, you are familiar with requirements traceability, and that's what the government has called it. And I was doing this back in the 80s when I was doing a lot of government work. So this is nothing more than just simply kind of repackaging the idea of requirements traceability in kind of a simpler format. Questions on the GBS? Okay. Let us then proceed. So, in summary, we're going to use the GBS as our mechanism for defining the characteristics of each of the work packages. We're going to base those on the requirements for the deliverables. And our work packages simply need to satisfy the deliverables, no more, no less. And for those of you who have seen me do a live seminar, you know I just keep pounding, no more, no less. That goes with requirements, it goes with work, it goes with resources, it goes with money, it goes with everything. Nothing more than we need, nothing less than we need. Here's a simple example of a GBS in a very simple project. We're building a table here. There's our deliverable. Our requirement for our table will be 3 by 6 by 3. We're going to break those down into simple components of legs and tabletop. And you notice the tabletop's going to be an inch thick, and that might be based on material and weight requirements. If my tabletop is an inch thick, then obviously my legs have to be 2 feet 11 inches in length in order to give me a 3-foot tabletop. And that's exactly how a GBS works. It is literally that simple. So we're going to define each work package. It's going to represent a component of the deliverable. Each component will have a complete, measurable, testable specifications. Each work packet will have accurate estimates, cost and duration. And we delegate work packages. And if you remember our webinar last month when we hit on ownership, we don't delegate work, we delegate deliverables. It's the deliverable I want, not the work that goes into it. Now that we understand how this all plays together, the last two pieces we need to add is quality. Once we have clear, measurable, testable, verifiable requirements or specifications for our work packages, obviously each team or team member, when they create their work package, has to validate those. And I'm going to do this poll real quickly. I am kind of running out of time, so I'm going to ask you to do this pretty quickly. What percentage of your work packages or activities do you peer review? What on your projects? What percentage of work packages or activities in your projects do you peer review? And it's okay to be honest. Nobody's going to be able to see the results of you specifically, so go ahead. Most people voted. Again, I'm going to run this really short because I'm running out of time. I got about 73% of the votes in. And I'm going to go ahead and close this and we'll show the results. So yeah, this is, again, typical numbers I see. Yes, we have people that do 80 to 100% in our companies and KSP Partnership and Ally Business Developers. If it's at all possible, nothing goes out without a second pair of eyes. And some of these peer reviews are formal, some of them are informal, but if it's at all possible, unless it's under a dire emergency, nothing goes out with a second pair of eyes. And every time something does absolutely slip out with a second pair of eyes, we regret it. There's just some stupid thing that went wrong with it. Peer review everything. It is a lifesaver. It is one of the key things that makes projects work. They also build magnificent teams. They also break down barriers between team members and across project teams. They are absolutely wonderful tools. And for our purposes, they make sure that when a work package is done, it meets specifications. So when we move it on to the successor, they're getting exactly what they expected. If any changes occur, and they will, we've already figured out that nobody's perfect. If changes do occur during a work package, these need to be communicated, which brings us to our last minor topic of collaborative spirit. So here's your work package. You have, for this particular case, 2 succeeding work packages. You have 2 preceding work packages. And, you're doing your work package and you want to be proud of it. And you want to do a good job. So, what would you like to know? Well, obviously, you want to know what you're getting and where you're getting it from and who you're getting it from. So you want updates from all the people who are predecessors to you. You want to know exactly what they're building. You want them to build it correctly. And if there are changes that have to occur, you want them to tell you, which means the people downstream from you need to hear the same things. As you're working on your work, yes, it is change management, but it's a little bit more than that, Diana. Collaborative spirit is it is a very proactive, make sure that everybody's that's involved is just simply kept up to speed and we work together. A lot of these little things don't formally run into change management. If you're going to be a day or 2 late on something, those typically won't hit. If there's going to be minor changes in a component, those typically won't hit. This is just everybody working together, being courteous to each other, understanding each other's needs. That's collaborative spirit. And it is absolutely change management, but it's at a collaborative team, let's work together kind of level, So what do we need? Well, simply as changes occur, the smaller ones, we'll just communicate them. The larger ones, absolutely, we'll write them up. Schedule changes, communicate, and provide accurate status updates. And we just all work together as a team. It is amazing, once we understand the mechanics of intertask dependencies, how these minor little things can become major as the project progresses if they're not caught. It is amazing how fast you can get projects done. With that, I can't believe I made it. I was so far behind half an hour ago. I'm so happy. Questions. We talked about the problems with intertask dependencies. We talked about work packages, goals, breakdown structures, key success parameter 6, rigorous quality, key success parameter 4, collaborative spirit. Zishan, you have your hand raised. Is there something I can answer for you, or? Can you still do a precedence diagram for linear projects? Yes, Zishan. Stuff I do by myself, I still do a precedence diagram because sometimes I'll do something and realize, oh, darn, I was going to say a bad word. Oh, darn. I should have done something else prior. Yeah, I kind of do. Even if you have one or two people on a team, I don't spend a huge amount of time on it. I just want to make sure I understand the progression of the activities. And even with two teams, as soon as you get two people on a team, it's the importance starts to escalate. It works really well there. What else do we have? In an ideal world, that would be amazing. Company culture sometimes has, Diane, we have to talk. Um, Kimmy and I have been working literally for a decade, and seriously for half a decade on understanding how to improve cultures to address this. So honestly, there's um, the answer to it is a big question. Um, Contact me afterwards. We'll talk. There's the next slide coming up is our contact information, and it's also on the download. So contact me. We can talk about that. Let me come up with try to change a culture. People make mistakes, letting them realize that it's an issue. That Zishan. That's another one too. I think you can try to change the culture by letting people make mistakes and letting them realize that um, it's an issue. Zishan, I love allowing people to make mistakes as long as it doesn't impact the project. There are a lot of times I've seen project or team members going off in their own direction, and as long as it's recoverable, sometimes I just let them go, man. I just let them do it, and I let them make the mistake, and I let them see firsthand that, yeah, that was the wrong thing to do, and now they're quite happy to listen to the new one. And one more, because I do have to close up here. Not a question. First, when I left, wasn't anything. It was me. Second. Good. Okay. Thank you, Zansha. Or Sonia. Appreciate that. Yeah. I was beginning to wonder if I could pull it off too. All right. I do have to wrap up here. Kimmy will be doing rigorous quality next month. And if you're on our mailing list, you should have gotten our newsletter today. It went out this morning. You'll find a link there and we'll start advertising it. We are also starting to do micro lessons on YouTube. So you will find that on that slide there. That is also in your packet as well. And I do need to wrap up. So any other lasting things before I need to wrap up here? All right. Well, I thank you all very, very, very much for attending. I am delighted we had such good turnout. And please do get in contact with us if you have any questions. Take a look at some of the micro lessons. We're going to be adding a lot over the next couple of months. And thank you all for attending. I appreciate it. PDU question before I do this. I'll